Also, we're keeping the license plate. We're not giving it back.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, hi, how are you? Good, and you? Good to see you. I had the beacon. Find out
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln on this Sunday morning. My name is the Reverend Dr. Oscar Sinclair. I'm joined by our worship associate, Charlie Ahern, and by all the folks who come together every week to make these services possible. Our vision as the Unitarian Church of Lincoln is that we aspire to be a loving community, uniting reason with spiritual exploration to transform ourselves and the world. It's a big dream, one that has carried us through economic uncertainty, pandemic, climate change, and difficult times in the state of Nebraska. We dream big at UCL, and then we work to bring those dreams into the world because we know we are capable of doing big things together. The world needs transformation. It needs love. And when we gather, we bring our spirits and our reason to that task. Now, this morning is Memorial Day, but it is also two particular things here at the Unitarian Church of Lincoln. Each year in the late spring, many Unitarian Universalist congregations, including this one, hold a flower service where flowers are exchanged among members of the congregation. We'll talk more about the symbolism of that later on in the service. For now, remember that this is a service that has been part of our Unitarian tradition for over a century, starting in the Prague Unitarian Church in the 1920s and continuing to here. So if you have brought flowers, if you have not already, place them in the center here. As the first hymn plays, you're invited to come place flowers in this central bouquet. Second exciting thing today, the Unitarian Church of Lincoln placed a time capsule on its grounds in 1999, to be opened 25 years later in the spring of 2024. Today, it has been 25 years. So our service this morning uses some of the same elements from that 1999 service, some readings and some hymns. And we're going to try to keep this service short. The plan in the script is to do a flower service that lasts 45 minutes. If we manage that, this will be a thing to write to the whole UUA to tell them it can be done, we did it in Lincoln. But the plan is to do a 45-minute long service. So 50 minutes from now, when it has taken longer than 45 minutes, we will close the service, but we will not go out to coffee hour. We will instead go out to the back patio to open the time capsule that was placed 25 years ago. That is exciting. And then, because that's not exciting enough, after we open the time capsule, we will then come back in here to do a town hall and talk about governance.
That's exciting.
That's exciting. We have our congregational meeting next weekend, and so the town hall is a chance to ask and answer any questions in advance of that meeting, to meet the people running for the Board of Trustees, to talk a little bit about where we're at as a church. All right, with all of that happening today, and knowing that we are already 5 minutes into our allotted 45 minutes, let us begin with lighting our chalice.
These opening words were written by the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, the former president of the UUA. As we light our chalice this morning, may we be mindful of how radical and powerful love is, and how dangerous those who use fear perceive love to be. May we know how necessary and essential it is to keep alive the message of universal love, of humanity and human dignity, of reverence for life, all creation, in our hearts and in our actions. We are now among the keepers of that flame.
Our opening hymn, taken from that service in 1999, is number 347 in the Gray Hymnal, Gather the Spirit. Would you please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing?
Thank you. like to come forward for the story, you're welcome to do so now. And I invite my mom, Beryl Oschenberg, to join me up here as well. Our story today is called One Flower in a Field by Joshua Cyril White. It's from the book in Magic Wanda's Travel Emporium, Tales of Love, Hate, and Things in Between. Once upon a time, there was a field. It had dry grass, brambles and thistles and high places and low places and rocks scattered around, and a stream that passed alongside. And scattered around here, there, and everywhere were flowers. Buttercups and tulips, coneflowers and lupines, all kinds of bright, beautiful flowers growing up out of the dry grass. And now you may ask, how could these flowers grow when the field was so dry? And the answer is that next to each flower was a hole in the ground. And in each hole lived an animal whose job it was to tend that flower. Most were rabbits, but there were hedgehogs and field mice and even a badger or two. And every morning, each animal would come out of its hole, hop or scurry down to the stream, and use a leaf to scoop up some water. And they would each carry their leaf back and water their flower. And in a little gully in this field, next to a tall sunflower, lived a rabbit. And every day she would go down to the stream and get some water for her sunflower. She loved that flower. It was tall and bright, strong and healthy, and she took very good care of it.
One afternoon, the rabbit decided to hop up to the top of a little hill alongside her gully. And when she got to the top, she saw something that she had never seen before. Down a ways, she saw a flower. It might have been a daisy, but it was hard to tell. This flower looked in really bad shape. Now, why she had never seen that flower before? Well, it's not that big a mystery. She had just never climbed to that particular hill before in that direction. Of course, she knew that the field was full of flowers, right? She knew that. She may have heard some were not doing quite as well as the others, but she had never actually seen one that looked as bad as this one did. She hopped down the hill to take a closer look, and then she began to understand. This flower needs water. Its stem was bent, and its petals were wilting in the heat. The ground around it was parched and dry. The rabbit felt bad that a flower could be so neglected, and then she did nothing. Nothing at all. Even though the flower looked terrible, it was just one flower in a big field after all. The field had plenty of other flowers. They were doing fine. The rabbit had enough work to do watering her own flower. So she went home and she got on with her business, getting up every morning and going to the stream and watering her sunflower and hopping around the afternoon. But the other flower didn't go away. At least once a day, the rabbit couldn't help but hop up to the top of the hill and take a quick look. And every day, the flower looked worse.
And it started to get to her. The rabbit thought about that flower at night while she was trying to sleep. She thought about it in the morning when she hopped to the stream for water. She couldn't even enjoy her own flower so much, knowing the other flower was wilting more and more every day. Now, you may wonder, why didn't that rabbit just go over and water the flower? After all, it was not far away, just on the other side of the hill. The stream had plenty of water, and the rabbit had plenty of time. Well, that was a good question. And the rabbit thought about it all the time. She'd think about making an extra trip to the stream to get some water for that flower. But then she'd think, Well, you don't just march into someone's front yard and water their flower without asking, do you? What if that flower is someone else's to water? They might yell at me or something. Or she'd think, what if the flower likes being dried up and droopy? That's possible, isn't it? Or she'd think, aren't there animals who are supposed to go around and help out flowers whose animals don't water them? I should leave it to them, right? Well, with all these questions swirling in her head, the rabbit went about her business, taking care of her sunflower every day and trying not to think about the other flower.
Our friend Rabbit, she had many questions swirling in her head, and she was trying to forget about that poor, sad flower that needed water. But it kept bothering her, especially at night. You know, it was kind of irritating, actually. Sometimes she wished the flower would just get better itself or die. Ooh. But every time she sneaked a peek, there it was, looking more dry and more wilted and more droopy. Until finally the rabbit could take it no longer. One morning, hopping from the stream with a leaf full of water for her sunflower, she suddenly thought, this just isn't right. It just isn't right. Flowers aren't supposed to wilt like that. Flowers should be healthy and colorful and bright and beautiful. And she found herself hopping over to the hill towards the other flower, taking the water there instead. And at the top of the hill, well, the rabbit got a little nervous. Her nose twitched as she sniffed the air. It might be dangerous up here. She shouldn't be watering other animals' flowers, but she said, it's just not right. And she kept going over the hill and down the other side, and the rabbit hopped close to the dry flower, closer than she had ever been before.
And suddenly a hedgehog popped out of the hole in the ground. And the hedgehog yelled, hey, what are you doing?
I'm going to water this flower, the rabbit said. It's too dry. If I don't water it, it's going to die.
The hedgehog said, well, what business is it of yours whether this flower dies? This is my flower. I'll take care of it how I want. You go home and take care of your own flower.
I'm sorry, I can't do that. I tried. Flowers are supposed to be bright and beautiful, not wilting and droopy. So I'm going to water this flower. And she watered that dry, wilting, drooping daisy right there in front of the hedgehog, though he fussed and mumbled and gave her mean looks. And she turned around and hopped back over the hill. The next day, she came back with a leaf full of water and watered it again. And the day after that, what did she do?
She watered it.
She watered it, exactly. And then another day and another day. The hedgehog continued to fuss and mumble and give the rabbit mean looks. But the flowers started to look better. First, the petals perked up. And then the stem began to stand up and get a little straighter, and then its leaves started to fill out and get a little bigger, and the flower even grew a little taller.
And strangely enough, as this flower got brighter and healthier and taller and more beautiful, so did the rabbit's own flower. And so did every other flower, all the flowers in the field, even the ones she never watered, flowers she had never even noticed before. The whole field began to brighten as the colors of every flower became more vivid and the flowers stretched taller. It was almost as if there was more water everywhere.
How could that be? Were other rabbits and hedgehogs and field mice, even badgers, sneaking around and watering other animals' flowers? Or was it because when someone waters a wilting flower somewhere, all flowers everywhere grow a little bit bigger?
Who knows? Maybe we'll just have to try it and see. And that is the end of our story. The children can head back to their seats, and I invite our guest musician to play.
Good morning. I'm Kim Zeman, President of the Board of Trustees. I want to offer a special welcome to those of you who are visiting for the first time. I have a few announcements to share as our church community extends beyond Sunday morning worship. Today, after service, we will open the time capsule from 1999. Items from the time capsule will be on display in June, and then after this short ceremonial opening, members are invited back inside for a quick bite of cookies and grab a cup of coffee, and then join us for the second town hall at 11:30, which will be both in person and live streamed. Members can get to know the 3 board candidates and ask questions about items on agenda. For the spring congregational meeting next Sunday, June 2nd, after the service. Members will be voting for the 3 board members and the 10 Share the Plate recipients. And then please save the date for our 3rd Thursday service. In lieu of a service, we are going to be having a potluck to celebrate our time with Reverend Dr. Oscar Sinclair.
Each week we set aside time in our worship service to share with each other the sorrows and joys of our life. We do this because we are a gathered community, because it's easier to celebrate with friends and it is easier to mourn when there are people that care about us around us. So into this shared silence and this shared community, I now invite you to speak your name or the name of someone you are holding in sorrow this morning. you are on the live stream, you can type those names into the chat and I will relay them to the room. Who are we holding in sorrow this morning?
The people around Rogers, Arkansas with the tornado damage last night.
The folks affected by tornado damage in Rogers, Arkansas.
Jala,
Jala,
Carol.
Carol,
the Dobkin family.
the Dobkin family,
Gaza,
Gaza,
Jenna.
Jenna,
Emerson Unitarian Church in St. Charles, Missouri.
Emerson Unitarian Church in St. Charles, Missouri. Oralee,
Linda.
Linda,
The Zima family.
the Zima family. We know that just as sorrow is part of the story, it is never the whole story. The psalmist writes, "Sorrow endures for the night, but joy cometh with the dawn." If you would speak your name or the name of someone you are holding in joy this morning.
Ellie Hansen, who grew up in this church, married Ryan Croker last night.
Ellie Hansen married Ryan Croker last night.
And Alan and Lois Hansen, whose birthday it is today, and the grandparents of Ellie Hansen.
Alan and Lois Hansen, grandparents of Ellie, whose birthday would be today.
our auction team.
Our auction team.
Kurt Donaldson, who devised the great thing you'll see out there today.
Kurt Donaldson, who devised some way of opening up a 25-year-old time capsule.
Rebecca and Pat getting married tomorrow.
Rebecca and Pat getting married tomorrow.
All the graduates.
All the graduates. In the chat, there is a joy from Mary Summermeyer. Earl and I have been married for 49 years. And then while it came earlier in the service, it is certainly a joy. Amy Miller has just written accordion joy. Joy and sorrow are woven fine, but like a bouquet, they make up the life of a congregation. So as we reflect on both the joys and sorrows shared, will you join some of our musicians in singing our next hymn, number 396, I Know This Rose Will Open.
I know
watch the clock. Each week, we take up a collection to support the work of this church and our partners in the community. We do this because just as we all grow from our participation in this community, we all give back through our time, our talent, and our treasure. As the music plays, the ushers will pass our offering plates. You can also give by texting UC Lincoln and the amount to 73256. That's UC Lincoln and the amount to 73256. The offering will now be gratefully received.
So I don't know how many people other than me will remember this, but one of my very first services at the Unitarian Church of Lincoln was Flower Communion. I was candidating. I hadn't even been called yet, and because that had happened late, it happened during Flower Communion. This next reading is one of the readings that we did at that service. It is a reading about gardens, but of course it's not just a reading about gardens. Early in the morning, before the children are awake and while the grass is still dewy, I like to walk in my garden. It is my garden only because it shares the same small plot of land my family and I inhabit. The garden does not really belong to me, I belong to it, at least for the short time that I'm here. Today, I'm still in my slippers and have my first cup of coffee in hand. Much of what grows there has been planted 2 or 3 homeowners ago. Some I've planted since our arrival, but if they belong to anything or anyone, the plants and flowering trees I come to see and smell, viburnum, dogwood, magnolia, crabapple, belong to the sun and rain and soil. These living things are not a beauty of my making, though surely they are of my desire. At the moment, the rose bushes are in full burst of red and perfume. The hydrangeas are sure to open their moppy heads as soon as the sun falls on them. The weedy-looking globe thistles are turning lovely blue and spiky. The foxglove, however, rules the garden. Its central stalk is 5 feet high and heavy with pink scoop-shaped leaves with charming freckles inside. I am awed by the abundance. I'd intended to walk the garden simply to observe and wonder. But there's a weed that has to be pulled, a stray stem that needs to be pruned, a blossom drooping and fading that should be snipped. So I set down my coffee cup on the back porch, grab a small pail, and go to work. I end up with muddy hands, wet slippers, and a pail full of weeds and trimmings. Why can't I simply observe and wonder? Won't the beauty of my small garden world survive without me? I step back to the porch to retrieve my coffee, now cold, stamp the dew off my slippers, and take one look back at the garden before I return into the house. The garden is no more beautiful now than when I first arrived. My weed pulling, pruning, and snipping haven't really improved the garden, nor made much of a difference as far as I know. It's like prayer, you see. The words I speak don't really change anything, but I know they change me. So a congregation is not that unlike a garden. It's ours only because we share time and space in it, holding it in care while we're here. But also, there are rituals that are part of a place that we do over and over again because, well, that's just what you do in late spring or early summer. Flower communion, the flower service, is one of those in Unitarian Universalism. So brief, because I have 5 minutes left in this service. Historical interlude. Norbert Čapek was the minister of the Prague Unitarian Church in the 1920s. And at the time, Prague, in then Czechoslovakia, was the largest Unitarian community in the world. And Čapek, along with his wife Maya, wanted a ritual that could become part of the congregation's life but would not depend on Christian ritual. And what they settled on was this idea that once a spring, they would have members of the congregation come together and each bring a flower from their garden and place it into a central bouquet. A single chaotic bouquet made up of the unplanned contributions of everyone. And that represented the congregation. And then at the end of the service, in the ritual they wrote, they invited people to come forward and take a flower from that central bouquet. There was one rule. The flower that you took could not be the flower that you contributed. This is about flowers, but it is also what we do in church every single year. the things that we get from the church are sometimes, always, different than what we put in. Maybe we put in our financial acumen and get a sense of the eternal. Or maybe it's the reverse. Maybe we come with our art and our sense of spirit and come away learning about the democratic process through town halls and how to read a budget. Maybe we don't know what we're bringing. Except maybe flowers from the grocery store on the way in because we forgot that it was flower communion. I've certainly done that before. And then we leave with the foxglove. The point of this chaotic ritual that we've done for 101 years now as Unitarians is that we don't know. We don't know walking into this place what we will walk out with. But it is doing this thing that connects us to generations that have done this thing before us, generations that will do it after us. And flower communion is not the only part of today, right? We also have this time capsule out there. It was placed in 1999, at the end of the last millennium. We can say that now. This congregation buried a time capsule. And in it, as best I can tell from looking at the material from 25 years ago, you placed your hopes and ideas for the future, for that far distant year of 2024. All morning we've been singing hymns from that service when you buried the time capsule. We'll close in a few minutes with a responsive reading from that service. There's a line in one of our hymns. We usually sing it at ordination, so it doesn't come up that often. Talking about those who have come before us, what they dreamed to be ours to do. It says, hope their hope and seal them true. So in a real way, brief reflection on flower communion, 90 seconds left. We are the hopes of Norbert Chapek, who said we need a religion with rituals that is not tied to Christianity, but is nevertheless meaningful in people's lives. Though it would be wrong in doing flower communion on Memorial Day not to also say that Norbert Chapek lost his life 20 years later in the Holocaust. He spent the last decade of his life fighting against totalitarianism. And that's also an important lesson for us today. This congregation is the kind of thing that he dreamed about. But this congregation is also the kind of thing that people dreamed about in 1999. So, real quick, how many of you were here when that time capsule out there was buried? Okay. 25 years. 4 ministers-ish, a few interns, a renovation. Lincoln is a very different city than it was in 1999. What were the congregation's dreams 25 years ago? That's a rhetorical question. We don't have time to answer it. What are our dreams now for this place for the next 25 years? For 2049? Also a rhetorical question. No way, nope, I'm at 45 minutes right now. So think about that one. That's homework before the congregational meeting. Whatever those dreams are, it's not going to happen because we dream it, because we want it. Those dreams will happen because everybody in this room contributes to them happening. Everybody brings their flowers to flower communion, right? It's the contributions that everybody makes that makes the chaotic mess of a beautiful bouquet that we put together every year for this service. That's how it works. That's how it keeps happening every year. So as Julia plays this next, excuse me, song, you are invited to come forward and take a flower, but not the one you brought. Let's begin. If you have not yet gotten a flower but still want to, they will be up here as we start to make our way outside. We're going to close this service with a responsive reading from that 1999 service where the time capsule was sealed up. So Charlie is going to lead everybody that side of the flowers. This side is north. This side is south. That's the opposite. Never mind. Charlie's going to lead this side, which is labeled as north, but it's a metaphor. We affirm this vision for the future. So a question to ponder, if you have been here for the last 25 years, is whether we have done that and how we will continue to do that. But for now, if you would please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, number 12 in the Gray Hymnal, also from the 1999 service, O Life That Maketh All Things New. Please rise. I am so sorry to report that it has been 55 minutes. But we are still going to go open the time capsule. So if you would make your way out that way, then turn right out to the patio. I believe Kurt and Harry have already set up the Indiana Jones contraption that is going to open this thing. I'll see you out there.